You know, if you're serious about thinking clearly about money, about avoiding the mistakes that quietly keep people poor, then staying close to this channel will help you over time. I mean that. We're not here to chase trends or tell you what stock to buy tomorrow morning. We're here to help you think differently about wealth, about behavior, about the long game. And if that matters to you, if you want to build a foundation that lasts decades, not days, then I'd encourage you to subscribe. Because what we talk about here isn't going to change next week. The principles we discuss have worked for 50 years and they'll work for the next 50. So if you're willing to listen, to learn, and to think long-term, you're in the right place. Now, what I'm sharing today is educational commentary based on principles I've discussed publicly over the years. It's not personal financial advice, but it is drawn from a lifetime of watching people succeed, watching people fail, and trying to understand why. Let me tell you something. Most people stay poor not because they're unintelligent, not because they didn't go to the right school or weren't born into the right family. They stay poor because of behavior. And the tragic part is they don't even realize it's happening. They think they're making rational decisions. They think they're doing what everyone else does. And that's exactly the problem. You see, I've spent more than 6 decades studying businesses, studying markets, and studying people. And what I've learned is this: intelligence is not the determining factor in financial success. Behavior is. You can have a high IQ, you can have an MBA from a prestigious school, you can understand complex financial models, and still end up broke. I've seen it happen again and again. Matter of fact, some of the smartest people I know have made the dumbest financial decisions. Why? Because they couldn't control their behavior. They couldn't sit still. They couldn't resist the temptation to do something when doing nothing was the right answer. They confused activity with progress. They thought moving fast meant moving forward. And that misunderstanding cost them dearly. Now let's talk about compounding for a moment, because this is where most people lose the game before they even start playing. Compounding is the most powerful force in finance. Albert Einstein supposedly called it the 8th wonder of the world, and whether he said it or not, it's true. But here's the catch. Compounding requires time. It requires patience. It requires you to leave your money alone and let it grow. And most people simply cannot do that. They panic when the market drops 5%. They sell when they should be buying. They chase performance, jumping from one investment to another, thinking they're being smart, thinking they're beating the system. But what they're really doing is destroying their own compounding. Every time you sell, every time you move your money, you interrupt the process. You reset the clock. And over a lifetime, that interruption costs you millions. I'll give you an example. If you put $10,000 into a good business, or the good index fund for that matter, and you leave it alone for 40 years, earning 10% a year, you'll end up with about $450,000. But if you pull it out after 10 years, move it around, try to time the market, chase the next hot stock, you'll be lucky to have a fraction of that. Most people don't fail because they pick the wrong investments. They fail because they can't sit still. And this gets to the heart of why people stay poor. They're impatient. They want results now. They see their neighbor buy a new car and they think they need one too. They see someone on social media talking about a stock that doubled in a month, and they think they're missing out. They feel pressure to act, to do something, to keep up, and that pressure destroys them. You see, wealth is built slowly, quietly, without drama. It's built by living below your means, by investing consistently, by avoiding debt, by being patient. But our culture doesn't reward patience. It rewards speed. It rewards excitement. It rewards people who look successful, not people who are successful. And so most people spend their lives chasing an image of wealth instead of building actual wealth. Let me tell you about leverage for a moment, because this is another place where people go wrong. Leverage means borrowing money to invest or to buy things. And leverage is dangerous. It amplifies gains, yes, but it also amplifies losses. And more importantly, it forces you to act. When you're leveraged, you can't afford to sit still. You can't afford to be patient. You have to make payments. You have to respond to margin calls. You lose control. I've always been very careful about leverage. I've seen brilliant people wiped out because they borrowed too much. They were right about their investments, but they were wrong about their timing, and leverage punished them for that. The market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent, as the saying goes. And when you're leveraged, irrationality becomes your enemy. Most people don't think of consumer debt this way, but it's the same principle. Credit cards, car loans, personal loans, they're all leverage. They're all ways of borrowing from your future to pay for your present. And every dollar you spend on interest is a dollar that can't compound for you. It's a dollar lost forever. People stay poor because they finance their lifestyles. They buy things they don't need with money they don't have to impress people they don't like. And over time, that debt becomes a weight they can't escape. Now let's talk about risk for a moment, because most people misunderstand risk entirely. They think risk is volatility. They think risk is the stock market going up and down, but that's not risk. That's just noise. Real risk is the permanent loss of capital. Real risk is investing in something you don't understand. Real risk is paying too much for an asset. Real risk is not having a margin of safety. When I look at an investment, I'm always asking, what's the downside? What could go wrong? How much am I paying relative to what this business is actually worth? And if I can't answer those questions with confidence, I don't invest. It's that simple. But most people don't think this way. They see the market going up and they assume it will keep going up. They see a stock that's doubled and they think it will double again. They confuse a rising market with a safe market. And that confusion is costly. Matter of fact, the best time to invest is often when things look terrible. When everyone is panicking, when the headlines are screaming, when your neighbor is selling everything, that's when you should be buying. But you can only do that if you have capital. And you only have capital if you've been disciplined, if you've saved, if you've avoided debt, if you've been patient. Most people are forced to sell at the bottom because they're over-leveraged, because they need the cash, because they panicked. And that's how wealth is transferred from the impatient to the patient. I've watched this happen in every market cycle, in the early 70s, in 87, in 2000, in 2008. The same pattern every time. The crowd panics, sells at the worst possible moment, and then buys back in after the market has recovered. They buy high, sell low, and then wonder why they can't get ahead. It's behavior. It's always behavior. Now let me tell you about opportunity cost, because this is something most people never consider. Every dollar you spend, Every investment you make, every decision you take, it has an opportunity cost. It means you can't use that dollar for something else, and over a lifetime those opportunity costs add up dramatically. When you buy a new car for $40,000, you're not just spending $40,000. You're giving up what that $40,000 could have become over the next 30 years. At 10% a year, that's almost $700,000. So that car didn't cost you $40,000. It cost you $700,000. But most people don't think this way. They think in terms of monthly payments, not lifetime costs. And that's why they stay poor. Every purchase, every decision, every use of capital, it's a trade-off. And if you're not thinking about what you're giving up, you're not thinking clearly about money. Wealthy people understand opportunity cost. They ask, is this the best use of my capital? Will this move me closer to my goals or further away? Most people don't ask these questions, they just spend. And then they wonder why they're not getting ahead. Let's talk about cash flow for a moment because this is fundamental. Wealth isn't about how much you make. It's about how much you keep. It's about how much you invest. I've known people who made $200,000 a year and lived paycheck to paycheck. And I've known people who made $50,000 and became millionaires. The difference wasn't income. It was behavior. Wealthy people live below their means. They save aggressively. They invest consistently. They don't care what their neighbors think. They don't need to signal success. They're focused on building actual wealth, not the appearance of wealth. And that discipline, that focus, that clarity, it compounds over time. Most people do the opposite. They spend everything they make, or more. They upgrade their lifestyle every time they get a raise. They think they deserve luxury because they work hard. But hard work doesn't entitle you to anything. The market doesn't care how hard you work. It cares about the decisions you make. And if your decisions are driven by ego, by comparison, by the need to keep up, you'll never build wealth. You see, I've always believed that the most important quality in investing and in life is temperament. Not intelligence, not education, temperament, the ability to stay calm when everyone else is panicking, the ability to think independently, the ability to resist the crowd, the ability to be patient. Most people don't have that temperament. They're emotional, they're reactive. They let fear and greed drive their decisions, and those emotions destroy them. Fear makes them sell at the bottom. Greed makes them buy at the top. They're always one step behind, always chasing, always reacting. And you can't build wealth that way. I'll tell you a secret. The stock market is designed to transfer money from the active to the patient. It's designed to reward discipline and punish impatience. And it does that job very well if you can simply sit still, if you can avoid doing stupid things, if you can think long-term, you'll do better than 90% of people. It's not complicated. But it's not easy either because it requires you to go against your instincts, to ignore the noise, to trust the process. Now let's talk about intrinsic value because this is the foundation of everything I do. Intrinsic value is what a business is actually worth based on its cash flows, its competitive position, its management, its future prospects. It's not what the market says it's worth today. It's what it's truly worth over time. And the gap between price and intrinsic value is where opportunity lives. Most people don't think about intrinsic value. They think about price. They think about momentum. They think about what everyone else is doing. But price and value are not the same thing. Price is what you pay. Value is what you get. And if you pay too much, you lose. It doesn't matter how good the business is. If you overpay, your returns suffer. I've always looked for businesses trading below their intrinsic value. That's the margin of safety. That's the cushion that protects you when things go wrong. And things always go wrong eventually. The economy slows down. Competition increases. Management makes mistakes. But if you bought with a margin of safety, you're protected. If you paid fair value or more, you're exposed. Most people ignore this principle. They buy what's popular, what's exciting, what everyone is talking about, and they pay whatever price the market demands. They have no discipline, no framework, no margin of safety, and when things go wrong, and they will, they lose. It's predictable, it's preventable, but it happens over and over because people don't think clearly about value. Let me tell you about time horizon because this is where most people lose perspective. The market goes up and down every single day, every single week, every single month. If you're watching it constantly, if you're reacting to every move, you'll drive yourself crazy, and you'll make terrible decisions. But if you extend your time horizon, if you think in terms of years, decades, the noise disappears. The volatility doesn't matter. What matters is the long-term trajectory. And over the long term, good businesses compound. Good investments grow. Patient investors win. Most people can't extend their time horizon. They need results now. They check their portfolio every day. They panic when it drops. They celebrate when it rises. They're on an emotional roller coaster, and that roller coaster destroys their returns. Matter of fact, the average investor significantly underperforms the market over time, not because they pick bad investments, but because they can't sit still. They trade too much. They react too much. They let emotions drive decisions. I've always said that the stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. And it's true. If you can simply wait, if you can let time do the work, if you can avoid panicking, you'll do extraordinarily well. But most people can't do that, and that's why they stay poor. Now I want to talk about behavior versus intelligence one more time, because this is the core lesson. I've known incredibly intelligent people who failed financially, and I've known average people who became very wealthy. The difference was never intelligence. It was discipline. It was temperament. It was the ability to delay gratification, to think long-term, to ignore the noise. Wealth is not complicated. Spend less than you earn. Invest the difference. Avoid debt. Be patient. Don't do stupid things. That's it. But simple doesn't mean easy, because it requires you to go against human nature. It requires you to be different. And most people can't do that. They want to fit in. They want to keep up. They want to feel successful now, not in 30 years. And that desire, that need for immediate gratification, it destroys them. They finance cars they can't afford. They buy houses that stretch their budget. They carry credit card debt. They chase hot stocks. They panic and sell. They repeat the same mistakes over and over. And then they wonder why they're not getting ahead. But the truth is, they're getting exactly what their behavior deserves. Wealth is not a mystery. It's a result. And if you're not getting the result you want, you need to change your behavior. You see, I've spent my entire life studying what works and what doesn't. And what works is boring. It's unglamorous. It's slow. It's buying good businesses and holding them forever. It's living below your means. It's being patient. It's thinking independently. It's ignoring the crowd. That's it. There's no secret. There's no shortcut. There's just discipline applied over decades. And if you're willing to do that, if you're willing to be different, if you're willing to be patient, you'll build real wealth. Not the appearance of wealth, real wealth. The kind that lasts, the kind that compounds, the kind that gives you freedom. But if you're not willing to change your behavior, if you keep doing what you've always done, you'll keep getting what you've always gotten. And for most people, that means staying poor without even realizing why. So, here's what I'd encourage you to do. Think long-term. Think in decades, not days. Focus on behavior, not intelligence. Live below your means. Invest consistently. Avoid debt. Be patient. Ignore the noise. And stay close to principles that work, principles that have been tested over time. If you do that, if you commit to that path, you'll be fine, more than fine. You'll build real, lasting wealth. And that's what matters. And if these ideas resonate with you, if you want to keep learning, keep thinking clearly about money, then I'd encourage you to subscribe to this channel. Not because we need your subscription, but because you'll benefit from staying connected to these principles over time. Wealth is built slowly through discipline and patience. And if you're willing to walk that path, we'll be here to help you think clearly every step of the way.